to the Truckers of America today on this Thursday, April the 18th edition of Sidelines. And when storms again in Florida, Brendan producing the show from a truck stop. Look for some lot lizards to come in the background while we're in there.
I'm using an iPod Mini from about 20 years ago to stream the show today with some duct tape, baling wire, and chewing gum.
I don't even know what a mini iPod Mini is, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That was like you clipped it on.
Yeah,
you know
the little
that
thing.
was the thing.
Yeah,
before cell phones, really.
Oh yeah, it was big. Look, we got a great one. We got Jordan Davis Hill on 24/7 Sports covers Georgia in the first segment, and Matt Dean will join us as well around half past the hour. John Hartwell, ADULM, joins us. We're going to really get into what can the NCAA do to try to right the ship in college athletics with the newest news on the portal, and Gary Harris will check in from Tuscaloosa as well. Hey, smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Allow notifications on your Android or iPhone. Tell friends, families, and neighbors. Yeah. Hey, truckers are some of your most loyal listeners and viewers.
They are.
Because
if you're a trucker, give me a, if you see me producing the show.
Yeah, they've got a lot. They're consistent because they're repetitive in their routes and they listen. They are very good. They're great listeners. All of you are. Hey, all right, let's go. Here we come. Get pen and paper handy.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
Hi, Rob Brown here with you. We've got Coach Matt Dean over in Memphis and Jordan Davis Hill in Athens. A lot happening right now. We had 8 spring games last weekend, if that's what you want to call them anymore, Jordan. At Ole Miss, they played tag and patty cake and pin the tail on the donkey. I mean, I'm sure they did a lot during the practice before then, but do we have to be that insulting to the fans who pay their hard-earned money? What are those tickets, $1, $5, or are they free to get in there? But Kirby's not going to do that at Georgia, is he? Or is he?
I'd have to imagine if the idea was brought up to him, he would not have a very nice response. I really liked Phil Steele's summation. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, talking about Ole Miss. He said, don't waste your time watching it. I learned nothing from this scrimmage. But, I on one hand, I get the Ole Miss side of it. You kind of are making it into like an event. I think about like Auburn basketball doing tip-off at Tumors where they have like a dunk contest. It was essentially that sort of. Start was like, no, man, we're gonna get another practice in. We're gonna work these guys. I thought that game was tied. Kirby was like, nah, we'll just call it a tie. And everybody wins, I guess.
Yeah, it did. And so you got spring practice. What were your takeaways with the offense and the defense? I've read a lot. You put out so much great work.
I think the biggest thing, for the majority of spring, we heard about the offense getting the better of the defense. And I think that kind of got under the defense's skin. I thought they played great at G-Day. Defensive line looked really good. Bill Williams from Georgia just had an outstanding day. Had an interception. Didn't have that on my bingo.
Yeah.
But I think that defense kind of heard everybody talk about how great this offense is. And, well, if they can just get the defense to show up, maybe this team will, be as good as people think. I think the defense showed that, they've got an opportunity that they can be just as good as this offense. And I think if you're want it to go, I think you might have wanted to see Carson Beck be a little bit more accurate. He was like 25 or 40, something like that. So But other than that, I thought it was a very successful spring. I think they did a very good job of, getting good work, getting a lot of different guys involved. And for them is it seems like they bring relatively healthy. And at this point, that's really all you can ask for if you're Georgia.
Yeah, Matt Dean, jump in here.
Yeah, last year my feelings were very consistent on this. Georgia was the best team in college football, and Michigan was very fortunate that Georgia stubbed their toe and didn't make it to the football playoff, because Georgia would have won a third consecutive national championship if they make it to the Final Four. That's my opinion. I'm sticking with it. So heading in right now, it's always been Kirby's philosophy to be very, futuristic minded when it comes to how I'm going to make this team better. He's not going to waste an opportunity to not make this team better. And I expect Georgia, there's a lot of talk about, Ohio State having another great group of men. But, they also lost their quarterback in the offseason. McCord, I think, is at Syracuse now. I could be wrong. That's another big spot they have to fill. You have some additions to the Big Ten. Georgia, I know it's really early, guys, but Georgia's my favorite again. I mean, I think they just have – you cannot have the talent they've stacked in years and years and years in that locker room and not be. Okay? Tell me someone in the SEC realistically on the east side. I mean, I know there's talk about Tennessee taking another step, but they're going to have a really young quarterback in there. I just think if I'm a Georgia fan right now, I'm excited. Because we are every year we are who we thought we'd be. And last year, the SEC championship game didn't go their way, but they were still clearly, in my mind, the best team in college football.
Yeah. Jordan, when you can count the number of losses on your small digits of your hands for Georgia the last 3 years, that's pretty special. You talk about Carson Beck. So he was about 52% in the spring game. Who's backing him up now? Who is the biggest? Because at some point, I mean, he could get hurt, but it's hard to keep people around, and coaches are terrified of putting out a depth chart in today's environment.
Yeah, so the backup is Gunnar Stockton. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's a guy from Rayburn, Georgia, that has they've seen him make progress. Kirby talked really highly of him, and it's one of the interesting pieces of this portal season for Georgia. Add another quarterbacks right now. It's Carson Beck, it is Gunnar Stockton, and it's Ryan Puglisi, who's a true freshman. But it's not all that appealing of a sell for a portal quarterback, because you're saying, well, you're going to sit behind Carson Beck. You might be the second quarterback, might be able to get some mop-up duty. But next year, you can really get in and maybe be a factor. So I don't know how easy of a sell that's going to be. And a lot of these quarterbacks, if they're going in the portal right now, they want to go somewhere where they can play this fall. But they want to get to 4 scholarship quarterbacks. I think it won't be the end-all, be-all if they don't. They're trying to get – or they have – a preferred walk-on, Coulter Jen from Perry School down there in South Georgia. He's coming on. That's another guy that they'll at least have, 4 bodies, and they've got a few other walk-on quarterbacks. Colin Drake's a guy that played some at G-Day. But one of their big pushes during the spring portal cycle is to add another quarterback to kind of push Gunnar Stockton, because he's very clearly the second quarterback. But they want to try to get as much depth at the position as they can.
And another one, the running back room. You go back 5 or 10 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, everybody be talking about the running back room at these SEC schools. Now it's the wide receiver room. So is that the same thing at Georgia? I mean, they've always got talent, but who is the lead dog in that room? And I know Etienne, transferred from Florida. I don't know what his status is, but I'm sure he'll work all that out with the coaches. Or they'll tell him what he does. He ain't gonna tell the Kirby what he does. But let's talk about that.
Yeah, with the running backs, I think they're guys now. They had Andrew Paul enter the portal. I was a little surprised by that, because I figured he would sort of be one of the 3-4 running backs really taking carries this fall. But he was very clearly not the top running back, and I think he only had 4 carries at G-Day. So I don't know if he just sort of saw the writing on the wall, and they're adding 2 more freshmen during the summer. So maybe that, all right, kind of tied on numbers. I'm going to go see if I can play somewhere else. And I thought it was funny. Dan Lanning has already reached out to him. Now, Dan wasn't still on the Georgia staff when Andrew Paul signed, but I'm sure that he really respects Dell McGee's evaluation and understands that this guy, has talent. So I'll be interested to see where Andrew winds up. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be Trevor Etienne. He's going to be the lead back. Played at G-Day, didn't touch the ball a ton, but looked really good. Broke about an 18-yard run right up the middle. He's going to be the lead back. Rick Robinson, who's a redshirt freshman, he was one of the most impressive guys I saw over the course of spring. He's like 240. He's running over guys. He had a really nice day in the spring game. The question mark for me, and I think if you're a Georgia fan, you should feel pretty good about this, Branson Robinson, who, he tore his patellar tendon in August last year, and, that's a pretty long rehab. But he suited up. He did pregame warm-ups on Saturday. He didn't play, which I don't think that was surprising. But to see him at least suit up and be out there, I think that was pretty big. Very interested to see what he's able to do. And then they have one freshman, Chauncey Bowens, who was there this spring. They're adding Nate Frazier. They're adding Phillips Jr. They've got a lot of running backs. I think, they've really gone to a running back by committee. I think that's going to be the case again this year. But Trevor Eats that lead back.
Matt, it's kind of funny now, isn't it? Players used to get mad if they didn't get enough carries. Now, just give me 8 or 10. That's all I want.
Well, the running back room guys in general at the NFL level has been devalued, right? Because of the style of offenses. So if you have 6 talented guys in a room, you're seeing this happen nationwide. I know certain teams are always looking for, the versatility of moving a running back sometimes to a slot or a wideout situation. So not that that's happening in Georgia, but in other programs in the country. I know in the Midwest, being an Iowa Hawkeye guy, we've recently moved one of our running backs to wide receiver, new offensive coordinator. And this is we go back to the initial, your monologue, Rob. This is the time of year where the coach's personality kind of dictate what you're going to see in the spring game a little bit too. I mean, let's be honest, Lane is very comfortable with his skin. Lane's going to do what Lane wants to do. And he doesn't really care what everyone thinks about it, right? But offensively, you can't argue with his success and what he's done with his system and actually the way he's used the portal. Though, I mean, Ole Miss has taken some major steps with him when it gets to the point of beating a Georgia or beating, the next level team in that side. Hasn't had that success yet. But by all accounts, Ole Miss should have one of their most, plentiful returning teams that we've seen in a long time, especially at the quarterback spot, right? So getting back to the running back wide receiver discussion, really for me, running backs, that room has got to be very consistent. And this, coaches are always very shaky about personnel when running backs fumble a football. And I think if you're a talented running back, a lot of times that's the one intangible. If you come from the high school level to the college level and you fumble the ball a time or two in a 2 or 3 game sequence, you can drop pretty rapidly in that room. Also, you have the ability to come out of the backfield and catch the ball. I mean, I think that separates the running backs at the elite level. You even look this year with the Atlanta Falcons and Bijan Robinson, who was just so dynamic at Texas the year before he got drafted. I believe he was taken in the top
9th
pick. Yeah, the Falcons. And that just doesn't happen anymore. If you get one running back taken in the first round, it's a rarity these days. And, Bijan's got a bright future with the Falcons. One of the things we haven't discussed either when you look at the SEC this year, now we have Texas, Oklahoma in the mix, right? So that's going to be a unique situation with what Texas did last year. They were in the Final Four, lost a close game to Washington. We're going to have some fantastic matchups. We haven't really talked about the schedule coming up.
Georgia's schedule, Matt, look at that schedule.
It's incredible.
I know. Yeah. So, Jordan, Matt's making great points. I can't remember the last time a running back was taken in the first round. It is almost a rare. Trent Richardson kind of broke the bank on that one as the 4th pick back in the draft, April of 2012. Since then, that position, it's not his fault, but it is. It's because they didn't have a great career. I got to ask you, Jordan, the state of Georgia is putting out so many players. Kirby doesn't recruit. He chooses. What's one area on the team, though, that you feel like they need a lot of help on in the portal or, a miracle?
Well, it's kind of like what Rob on YouTube said. It's hilarious to hear what Georgia football is worried about, because if I wrote Georgia's needs, everybody in college football would say, yeah, right. Okay, yeah. Also, I did want to say, I think before Bijan, Quan was the last running back to go down, and he was like second overall. So, but as far as needs now, they really don't have any like pressing ones. We talked a little bit about quarterback, but especially when we're looking at the portal compared to like school recruiting, I would say it's a tackle. I think that they're trying to get some help there, but I think they're going to be selective because they've got a lot of bodies. They've got a lot of different guys that could step up, but they're all unproven. They're all younger guys that they want to see rise and do anything in the portal besides try to get a quarterback. I think it's defensive tackle. Now, looking to the recruiting side of things for high school, they're wanting help at edge, and they got a big commitment out of New Jersey. Darren Akinenbon, he committed after GA, 4-star Jersey. I think it's a guy they're really, really excited about. And receiver. The number, looking in the 2025, we're thinking they may receivers. I think it just kind of depends on how the rest of the board shakes out. But yeah, it's one of those things. I remember last year, Ryan Story. Sometimes, and just the Twitter. Yeah, we feel real bad for Georgia. They got a lot they got to fill because Georgia's stocked a little bit better than most in the country.
Well, thinking about guys, the high school players coming in, they're different. They're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, whatever. But yesterday morning, one of our guests on the show, Jake Wimberly, out of Jackson, Mississippi, was talking about they're starting to hear this talk. Nick Saban brought it up. The NFL is saying these players are coming and they're not properly developed. I don't think that's a problem at Georgia, is it? Yet.
No, I mean, I think that they know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
They get the guys that are 5 stars, 4 stars. But I swear, so much of when a guy comes in, you just hear Kirby talk about their competitive nature.
Yeah.
And what they are looking to do. And even, they picked up a 4-star quarterback yesterday in Ryan Montgomery. And what we heard from his high school coaches was he's just such a business-like approach. And, I mean, we're talking about like a 17-year-old kid, that he understands that he's got to go to work. And he sort of how Georgia recruited him. Georgia was sort of on him. Then they started looking at Juju Lewis, and they started looking at Matt Zollers and kind of backed off. And go to Florida. Georgia sort of gets a better feel for its quarterback board, says, all right, Ryan Montgomery's the guy we want. And, I could understand the kid being like, hey, man, where'd you go a month or two? But he very much understands how this thing works, and he committed to Georgia on Wednesday. So I think they know what they're looking for at this point when it comes to players' mind and the way they game, the way they want to come to Georgia and compete. And right to those guys, but I think they've very clearly tried to target those kind of players. And I think that more often than not, if you're coming to Georgia, because if you don't, you're probably not going to stay very long.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely agree with that because, Matt, you talk about the competitive nature. You love to hear about a kid that a lot of people I know, clients and people my age, they've been working so long, they don't remember when they started working. But give me some guy that's grown up working on a farm or doing construction work or something like that. I'll take that kid any day over some, sugar-coated kid that's been carted around by mommy his whole life. And, 15 minutes before practice is the first time that day he's been out of an air-conditioned, house or whatever. Kirby Smart gets it, doesn't he, Matt? A lot of coaches don't.
No, he does. And Jordan was mentioning earlier about the the need possibly for a defensive tackle. But, I think that's an area that we sometimes forget about. But that defensive line room is so vital to the success of a football team at any level. And I think, talking to my son who's in player personnel in a group of 5 school, they're always looking for extra help at defensive tackle, 3 technique, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's really, really hard to find. And it's a maturity thing, right? I come out of high school. Maybe I'm a defensive end. They move me inside. I'm probably 2 years in the weight room and 40 to 50 pounds from being able to legitimately contribute at that position. Yeah. So if I'm a defensive tackle and I leave my junior year in the portal, I probably have generated a lot of interest. Now, I don't know what my number is on the NIL value chart, guys, but I've generated interest because it's a position of need. There's a lot of rotation things too in that position. I mean, nowadays it's not uncommon to have 8 or 9 kids that are playing in those 3 to 4 spots. A lot of reps just because of the toughness required when you're trying to stop the run or bull rush someone and all the things that go on in the trenches. And I think if you look at Georgia and the success they've had in the NFL draft, they've got everything. And I'm really interested. Brendan, I just see you on the screen. I saw a lot of momentum with the Gators this weekend. I think they had their spring day. How did that go? I assume you were there.
Yeah. Well, Jordan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm everywhere. Right now, I'm hunting Wi-Fi since all over where I live. Producing the show from my phone and going to the next stop see if they have Wi-Fi. That's
incredible.
Yeah, I think the Gators. I think the Gators' overall take was, they got better on defense due to coaching. DJ Lagway was, the star guy coming in from Texas. Yeah. And, I think everyone was like, yeah, well, the game's coming pretty fast at him right now. He kicked in the sort of the second half with some of the competitive nature. I think, obviously that's design for him. But at the end of the day, I think the Gators got a little bit better, but their holes are the same. And we reported yesterday on GatorBait, Josh Pate wrote the article, the interview that he with Billy Napier, which we reported on that article, which was made the play call this year.
You're breaking up where we can barely hear a word of you. But I'm just going to say this, and I know because I listened to the Buddy Martin show last night, Jordan, talking about Napier being more relaxed. Kirby is relaxed, and Brendan was and I like what this conversation's about. These coaches that are comfortable in what they do. Will Muschamp's not going to be as involved this year because he's got a son playing at Vanderbilt, so he's going to be more of an analyst per se, whatever. But real quick before you go, I want to ask you the culture that they've got at Georgia. I see some headlines on 24/7, and that Georgia's worried about a bunch of guys potentially. Is it Georgia worries about guys leaving in the portal? I would be worried about who Georgia's going to take from other teams in the portal. I mean, that's what they've been doing. They had 16 guys leave back in January, didn't they? 5 of them were 5 stars, and they still ended up having the number 1 or 2 recruiting class in the country. So what is this just normal processing of athletes like everybody else does? Just gets highlighted because it's Georgia?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you honestly, like Kirby, it's kind of the opposite. He was asked, what level of concern do you have about players leaving, going to the, and he said, do I have any control of that? And the answer was no. He said, I don't worry about stuff I can't control. He said, if I worry about I can't control, I'm not going to be around very long. So, I think it's a situation. His answer, he said, that, look, they know how it works. He said, pointing to G-Day, he said, that's the easiest practice they've had all spring because, I mean, they get after. Said, they understand if they're going to stay at Georgia, what that entails. And that's not for everybody. And that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Kids can go elsewhere and be successful. But, I think it's a situation he understand, as much as he worries about depth at like offensive line or defensive line, quarterback, like we talked about, he's still sitting pretty compared to a lot of his, competitors and other coaches. So he wants everybody to stay. I'm sure that with some of those conversations, like we talked about with Andrew Paul, they had a conversation and stay and try to play a pretty significant role in the fall. But, I don't think Kirby's losing sleep over it. I think he knows how deep of a roster he's got. And they want to retain as many kids as they can. And they did a good job back in the winter keeping guys who had talked about leaving. But they understand people are going to leave. And I think I wish them well and continue working with the group they got.
Yeah. Look, Jordan, great stuff. Having some technical issues today. Great stuff as always when you're on here. Let's do this again next week, get more in depth. I want to talk more just about your thoughts on where we're going in the SEC. Because again, Texas is coming in, but they don't have Bo Davis anymore. LSU's got him. That's a big, big deal. But how can people follow you? And again, you put out nonstop. You work to put out nonstop information on Georgia, college football, recruiting, and all like that. And that's true grit journalism. So thank you, and we love having you on here.
I appreciate that. Dogs247.com still got a 50% off sale for anybody. Hey, I got a birthday tomorrow, so there would be no better birthday gift than some of the listeners on Sidelines. Go sign up at Dogs247, but also on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at Dogs247.
Hey, Brendan, can you put up that QR code for that? I know we're having to produce remotely from the truck stop or wherever he is today, but God, I love my producer because most people would throw in the towel, but Brendan hunkered down and found excuses to win. What do you got, Lauren? All right, but we'll get that up there. So it's a half off special for all dog fans on 24/7 to subscribe to Jordan Davis Hill. Happy birthday to you a day in advance. You're a great man. We love having you on here. Thanks.
All right. Appreciate you guys.
You bet. I want to tell you what, Matt, I can just imagine, wherever Matt went to, but anyway, there's Matt. Well, things happen. Again, I got a client that lives down in Spring Hill, Florida, FedEx pilot, retired. Not too far from the Steinhatchee River. It's about 46 miles north of Tampa. They love it down there. And said, hey, man, you're flying a, Mac 10, 747, whatever, from Memphis to Heathrow to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, halfway across the Atlantic. You're going over there. Out to your left, you can see Iceland, about 150 miles away. That's how you do it when you fly the global route. You lose an engine. What do? He goes, I got 3 others. Hey, internet, trees fell down on Brendan's house all around the neighborhood. But he hung in there and he fought and he found excuses to win. Matt, I got to tell you something. What's going on in college athletics? You just talked about your son at Oregon. That's a big ass deal, finding defensive linemen.
Yeah.
But you said he was a part of a group of 5 schools. You said
I meant Power 5. I
was going to say, but even more so, it's P4, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, where are we? Where are we today?
I'll just tell you this. It's a true story. So Tyler's been at Oregon. This will be his 3rd season with Coach Lanning. What's today? It's April. I knew tax day was Monday, Rob. I know tax day was Monday. But anyway, trying to get a hold of him ever since he got back from a couple of weeks he had it off in Florida. I mean, in February, they are nonstop. This business is nonstop. They're passionate about what they do. And, the portal is nonstop. Tried to call him last night, 2-hour difference in the time zone. Dad, I'll talk to you later. I'm going to a recruiting dinner right now. So it's just Dan Lanning's out of the Kirby tree. Those guys are tenacious when it comes to recruiting. That's what people, you can't stop the machine right now with Georgia. There's too many players in every class. And, I know sometimes we graduate guys or whatever. They go to the draft, and you're like, well, that's a big loss. Then you see the replacement, and you're like, oh my gosh, this kid is faster. He's tougher. He's more physical, whatever you want to call it. And that's what George is. The job that Sark's done at Texas is very impressive. You know what I'm saying? And I think I'm just intrigued this year with their addition, Oklahoma's addition, to just the complete depth of the SEC. Like the fact that Florida and Billy Napier is in a big year this year because of the first 2 years. I never thought I would say that about Florida 10 years ago, when Florida had things rolling. And that's what's really interesting about college football is we can say there's a lot of things going on with the portal we don't like. We don't like NIL. It just keeps getting better, guys. I miss it already.
Well, it does, and I'm going to tell you, and Gary Harris will be with us in just a second. But the college football, we're 3 months away. We're 3 months away from having SEC Media Days out in Dallas, and this is what I think people need to think about. Is we've got now. Let me just play this for Gary. I don't know if he's ever heard this song before.
Not since about 5 minutes ago, probably.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. Gary, how are you doing this morning, man? Glad to have you on here. That was fun being on your show. You have a badass show.
Am I squared up? Is my screen squared up okay? Because I can see the two of you, but I can't see myself.
Yeah. We're having a little, Brendan, our producer, I love this guy. They had a massive storms come through Ocala, Florida last night. He's got trees all around, down everywhere, power's out everywhere. Even the Starbucks didn't have Wi-Fi. He went to the parking lot of a truck stop, and we were producing live from a truck stop. I don't know which one, somewhere in the Metroplex of Ocala, Florida, there in Marion County. But Matt, you got to put the app for Tide 100.9. I got addicted to this deal back in March of 2020 when they sent us home, from the office for a couple of weeks. We'll be right back. So I start listening to Barry and Wimp Sanderson in the mornings, and then Gary comes on, after us 9 to 11, and they got all these great shows. Ryan Fowler 2 to 6. It's just really cool how much you get when you follow these local guys and he does a great show. Rodney Orr, Tider Insider, who's on with us every week. You'll get so much out of that 22 minutes of content in a 30-minute show. SEC Network, they kind of gloss over. But so I got to ask you this question. I talked to a lot of Alabama friends, and how much is Texas going to miss him, and how much does Alabama wish they still had him? Bo Davis, I think the best. Him and Rodney Garner, the two best defensive line coaches that I've seen, along with Pete Jenkins at LSU.
Well, I think Coach Saban tried to hire Bo back again after this past season, and I do think that not being able to get Bo, because I think a lot of coaches were concerned about coming in with where Coach Saban was at, and I think that obviously was a factor too in Coach Saban deciding to retire. Bo would have never, left here had it not been for the NCAA situation, and then they tried to bring him back. I think before he went to Texas, and I think the league office or somebody might have blocked it. But, he's outstanding. I watched him work here, and the thing I always admire about Bo was, you watch different coaches coach, and there's very few of them in this day and age that can coach hard. And when I say hard, I mean in their face, giving them the business, and get those guys to respond. Most coaches that try that, those guys shut them out. If any, shut them out. Sometimes give it back to them. But Bo could really coach them hard, and they respected him, and they knew he was trying to make them better. And even in the warm-ups, when they're down the field before a game, I'd watch those defensive linemen, man, and boom! I mean, they were there was a lot of contact going on, and he was in their face. Then, great coach, and LSU is going to benefit greatly from having Bo Davis coach their defensive line. Texas is going to miss him, and I don't think Alabama's defensive line has been the same since he left. And that's not a diss on Freddie Roach, who's done a nice job, but there's only one Bo Davis, and he's as good as there is in coaching defensive linemen in this day and age.
Yeah, and Matt, you talk about your son being out there with Dan Lanning and how hard and Gary, I don't know if you heard it right before you came on. This will be Tyler's third year out there. He was 4 years with Jimbo Fisher at A&M, but he said they spend every hour they can scouring the countryside, all coast to coast, trying to find defensive linemen. And that's just they're so hard to find. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lifelong Bama fan a couple of nights ago, and he said, Brown, Marcel Darius, he only played in 9 games. And he was a proud product of what school in Birmingham, Gary?
Huffman High School.
Yeah.
Huffman Vikings. Yeah, I've always said, and you guys will, I'm sure, agree, and I'm going to keep this to the SEC, but when I watch an SEC football game and I watch a team come out of the tunnel, and then I go down on the field for warm-ups, I always look at the defensive linemen.
Yeah.
If you don't have those kind of dudes, you know what I'm talking about, the guys that look the part, it's hard. It's hard to go through 12 games and be really, really good unless you've got big, strong, athletic defensive linemen, and a lot of them. So I've always said that's the barometer I've always used. Now, granted, obviously quarterback, but as far as just the look test, I look at those defensive linemen. And if I see those guys that look like SEC defensive linemen, I'm like, wow, that team's got a chance. It's just hard to compete over the course of a season if you don't have some of those guys. And, Alabama this year's got a good-looking group. I mean, they got a bunch of them, 12 or 13, 14 of those guys that all looked the part. Now, I was disappointed in how they performed in the 8A game. Yeah. And I'd heard issues about the offensive line, and I told some people, I said, either the offensive line's a lot better or the defensive line's not as good. But, defensive lineman, that's I think, and even with all the schematic changes and all the different things that we do defensively, and regardless of what you run, 5 DBs, 6 DBs, if you don't have some guys up front on the line of scrimmage defensively, you're going to give up yards. You're going to give up a lot of them.
Yeah. Matt?
No, Gary's right. And, it's funny, Gary, I do the same thing when I'm at a college football game. And the next group I look at is usually the offensive line.
Yeah.
I want to know, can we protect our quarterback, and can we get to the quarterback, right? I mean, it's very simple, because if you can do those two things, Alabama's not lacking for skill, but you can have some deficiencies in certain areas if you are strong up front. I mean, it's always been that way. And even at the quarterback spot, it's unbelievable. You'll take some, I don't want to say game managers, serviceable guys, but if they have great protection, and you don't have to have Joe Burrow back there to win football games if you protect them. Yeah. And that's, we look at the NFL draft always, and we see these quarterbacks that usually are drafted really high, and we're very critical if they don't have success. Well, the reason they're drafted pretty high is usually because their team is very bad. They're going to, and they probably don't have a great offensive line. So it's, if you're stacking classes of defensive linemen, and that's another thing, Gary, we talked about right before you came on, you could sign some 5-star defensive linemen, but those guys, the weight room matters so much to those two position groups. A lot of time they may not get on the field for significant reps, so probably their middle of sophomore year, sometimes junior year, and still have a chance to be a very productive player and also go to the NFL. So the programs like Bama, Georgia, that have done that consistently, even when it's not going well offensively, you're still able to run the football usually, and you're still able to get after their team's quarterback. Like right now, as a Bears fan, we're going to take Williams at 1. I would love for us at 9 to have Dallas Turner, because we just signed Montez Sweat last year, got him in a trade from Commanders. I think Dallas Turner is the best defensive player in the draft. I really do. That's just – I always have been fascinated about the edge rusher position, monsters of the Midway, Chicago Bears back in the Richard Dent era. I just think Dallas Turner is going to be a tremendous football player at the next level. Yeah,
disruptive. Gene Chizik always used to say you want defensive linemen that play on the other side of the line of scrimmage. You want to disrupt, and those edge guys can do that. No, I'm with you, man. And on the offensive lineman too, you got to be able to. You got to have offensive linemen that can block those big, strong defensive linemen.
Yeah. And Dallas is another great product of the Catholic school system. St. Thomas Aquinas down in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, and people don't realize. I mean, Camden Brown, who's a receiver at Auburn, they won 2 or 3 state championships in a row. Gary, how important is it to recruit kids from winning programs? I think you cannot put a value on it. It's so important.
Well, I think it's important. Now, I will always say, because a lot of times kids get knocked for playing at little small schools. If you're a dominant player, and I don't care who you're playing against. You got to, that kind of dominance travels to the next level. But yeah, as a general rule, the better competition that a young man plays against, the better team that he's on, all of those things factor into him making the adjustment to college football. And so I do think it's important. It's not, again, I've seen, and you guys have too, I've seen players that were on bad high school teams.
Yeah.
And they didn't matter. They were so good. But yeah, for the most part, I think that you want guys coming from bigger, winning high school programs. They transition a lot easier to the college game as a general rule. And it's the same thing with, I've always said, it's like in recruiting. People say, well, they get the 5 stars and this guy gets the 1 stars and coaches them up. The one thing about highly recruited players, and you're right, there's sometimes you're going to find guys that bust and you're going to find other guys that weren't recruited. But as a general rule, the top high school player is going to make the best college players, and the best college players are going to make the best NFL players. As a general rule, the best continues to be the best. So if you can't count on every 5-star panning out, but and you can certainly take a few diamonds in the rough, but if all you're signing are diamonds in the rough, you're going to lose.
Yeah, you will. Well, you can have your cake and eat it too. You know what I mean by that? You didn't go to the Final Four out in Glendale. You had some people go out there and cover it for y'all. You stayed behind, and
unfortunately,
Kalen DeBoer decides on a Saturday, hey, I'm going to let y'all have some one-on-one interviews. Matt, can you imagine that? The local beat sports director, the writers, got to actually sit down and talk to the head football coach. That's what you get when you get somebody from the great state of South Dakota. And Kalen DeBoer sat down, and I watched what you did. It was damn good. You're really good at that give and take on the interviews.
First time in 17 years that a head football coach at Alabama sat down with local TV guys and did one-on-one interviews. It is. Nick Saban never did them. You might get one every blue moon.
Yeah.
But DeBoer in one morning sat down with me and the 4 stations in Birmingham, 5 TV stations for 15 minutes each, and right in the middle of spring ball to do that. So again, I'm not saying that's going to mean he's going to win a lot of football games, but it is a nice change and refreshing from what we've had in the past. Because I've been consistent on this. Coach Saban's as good as has ever done it, but his feeling on the local media was why?
Yeah.
Why? Well, what would I do 5 local interviews when I can do 1 interview with ESPN or 1 interview with CBS and cover the entire country? He just did not value the local media. Now, he would have us up occasionally for off the record, and he would have us on the radio, his radio show, every year he'd put some local media, put a lot of national media on there too. But local media just didn't get those opportunities. So it's nice to be back with a coach that sees the local media as valuable.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. Matt, something else too, watching Alabama's spring game last Saturday, 72,000. And I mean, and they played football. No pin the tail on the donkey, no tag, no water balloon fights like they did at some schools. I'm going to give them hell about that at Ole Miss. that was silly. But Matt, what do you think about that? Is that silly or is it smart?
Well, first of all, I'm excited for Kalen DeBoer because he's a Midwest guy like me. It kind of reminds me, when Hayden Fry came to Iowa back in the late 70s and throughout his tenure, just accessibility. And it meant so much to the state and the local media. I used to work as a college. I was a B News major in college, worked at WHO Radio. On
WHO
Saturday.
in Des Moines?
Yep. And my job Saturday was to cut offense and defensive highlights for our post-game show. That's how I got started in that side of the business. And I went into coaching and probably made a mistake. But anyway, I just look at what he's doing, he's coming into, it's the toughest job in America to replace the greatest coach ever. It's like, and it's not like, Saban left. I mean, he was probably one tip pass away from winning another national championship. That pass that they made, they got over the DB's hands on that crucial drive. If that goes the other way, Alabama wins that football game, and I really believe they win the national championship. So I think Kalen's doing it right. He's going down there. He's being very, transparent, especially to the local media. Reminds me of some things that Hayden Fry did when he got the job at Iowa. Now, much different circumstances. Iowa was terrible when he inherited the job, right? But, from the last 2 years, my son's been in Oregon, and Kalen DeBoer has been as good as anyone in the country with what he's done with Washington. So I'm really looking forward to, he had Michael Penix. Offensively, what will Bama look like that maybe they haven't looked like? I'm real curious to see that, Gary, because, that's kind of his specialty, his offense. And I'm curious to see the development of the quarterback.
Man, we saw a little bit of it in the spring game. I mean, the ball is going to come out quicker. I think that, he is and listen, you can't knock anything that's happened around here under Coach Saban. But I do think offensively, they're still going to run the ball. I like the system. I do think it's a very quarterback-friendly system. From the standpoint that I think they work hard to make sure they put the quarterback in position to be successful and, program the quarterback, so to speak, rep them to the point where it just kind of comes naturally and they're just, benefiting from a good system. One other thing on what you said, Matt, about Coach DeBoer coming in here with the transparency, the biggest thing he's doing is he's doing himself. I mean, he's being Kalen DeBoer. He's not trying to, and he and I talked about that, Rob, you watched the interview. He understands who he's following, but he also knows he's not Nick Saban. And he's not even trying, he respects Nick Saban. As he said, he'll call on him from time to time, but he's going to be Kalen DeBoer. And that hasn't always been the case. And Mike DeBose was a great defensive football coach, terrific defensive line coach. We were talking about defensive line coaches. Yeah. Mike DeBose in his day was right up there at the top. And, was an okay defensive coordinator. But as a head coach, when he took over here, he was so – and I wasn't here at the time when he first took over, but I was still following Alabama football. And, he tried so hard to do it the way that he thought Coach Stallings wanted it done or Coach Bryant wanted it done. Yeah. The first game he kind of, he had that little waddle jog that he had. He ran out there in that shirt and tie and sweated through it. And, later he went back to a coaching shirt. But he wore a shirt and tie because that's what Coach Stallings had done. That's what Coach Bryant had done. And that's what Coach Perkins had done. And he thought that that's what Alabama football coach should do. But he didn't understand and wasn't ready to be his own man in that role. And that's one reason I'm glad Alabama went outside the Saban tree, because if you bring somebody in that's been under Coach Saban, that influence is going to be so strong. They might be, well, how will Coach Saban have done it? And nobody's Coach Saban but Coach Saban. That's why a lot of times you see these guys that were proteges of these guys follow them and they don't do as well. So I think Coach DeBoer is his own man, and I think that's why he's so good.
Yeah, I like that question from Rob Anderson on there. Ask Gary how many offensive linemen and defensive linemen Alabama had under his 17 years that were state wrestling champs. And Matt, from Iowa, wrestling makes you just tougher. Don't forget to wear the pads unless you want cauliflowered ears, though. You know the deal.
Well, I think there were a few. And I hate that in the South, granted, Title IX was awesome and it gave women so many opportunities, but one of the first sports that got cut when Title IX expanded were wrestling programs. Alabama had a college wrestling program. John Hannah was a wrestler, and a lot of the SEC programs at one time had wrestling programs, and they got cut. But I'll say this: the high school wrestling scene in this state is pretty strong. There's some really good high school wrestling programs and throughout the South. So I'm with that thought process that if a guy wrestled, he's big, he's strong, he's athletic, flexible, and it certainly benefits them playing on the down line in the SEC. Yeah,
I did not know John Hannah was a wrestler from Valley Head, Alabama.
Yeah, I went to the Baylor School, in Chattanooga. Yeah, no, he was an outstanding wrestler. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine how to lock up with him?
Yeah, I mean, you think about that. Coaches in the old days will tell you. Well, I mean, ask anybody. My dad said the coaches were terrified of you lifting weights. It'll take away your flexibility. So a lot of coaches like Shug Jordan in the offseason, you had to either swim or wrestle. And you had, Sweet Umbaugh at Auburn. He won 39 SEC titles. He's in the Hall of Fame out in Stillwater. But I just think it gives them leverage. And I'm big on track and field, Gary. How many? That's something. We don't have enough athletes that are, playing multiple sports. And so I want to ask y'all both. I'll start with you, Gary. The athletes that we have today, they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. But are they mentally as tough as the guys 20, 30, 40 years ago?
I think it's a general rule, probably not. But I do think that the athleticism, the training, the diet schedule and all probably makes up for that. But I think guys now are coming up in a time where, like you said, most of them are focused on one sport. Get as many multi-sport athletes that go from one sport to the next. And also they're taught very early that if something's bothering you, you tell the coach. And it's, when we were growing up playing ball in high school, coach, I don't feel good. So, coach, coach, my shoulder's a little sore. Shake it off. I mean, you played through those things, and it did build a mental toughness. And a lot of guys that I grew up with in high school, I mean, they played through stuff to the point that, they were injured playing through it. So that's the downside of that. But now, especially guys that are really talented, they understand their future. And, hey, coach, my elbow's sore. I'm not practicing today. Coach says, okay. I mean, not a lot the coach can do anymore either. The coaches can't really push these guys through, because if you do, and then the young man or young lady really is injured, then that coach is in a hot water deal. So I don't think athletes push through the way that they once did, as a general rule. There's certainly some that do.
Yeah. Matt?
I think it's so looking back in the 80s, and that was the era when I was in high school and college. I look back and it was so refreshing to go to a different sport, and you can kind of have a different focus instead of being on the same sport year round. And I remember our state championship football team. I wasn't a part of that, but they also won the 4x100 in the state high school track meet. And I remember Marshall Cotton, Booker Scott, Rodney Taylor, Stevie Williams, all skill guys on our football team, all Division I football players, and they took such great pride. There's not a better, you mentioned track and field, Rob, there's not a more entertaining thing than the 4x1. And when it's done with the great handoffs with the baton, and you got some great athletes out there, it is fun. And I remember our state championship football team, we also won the state track title. And I do think that probably made us a little tougher year round, because we weren't worrying about one thing. We were being a kid. We were going and having fun and not worrying about, the trenches year round. Like our old linemen, they threw the shot and the discus, Gary.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of what they did,
Yeah.
I wrote down this when you're talking about linemen and wrestlers in the state of Iowa. Tristan Wirfs, who's the left tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
He was all pro. And the Ravens center, who started as a rookie, Tyler Lindenbaum, both were offensive linemen in Iowa, and they also were in the state championship heavyweight division, and it was a hell of a match. And
yeah,
I bet
you it would damn right.
Linemen are tough, man. I mean, wrestlers. I mean, they just, I can't imagine being in the same mat with John Hamm. I know that's we don't have AI here. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Just a beast. Just a beast. So
well, and you know what? I heard Lou Holtz talking in Birmingham a couple of years ago at the CoachSafely.org dinner, and Paul Feinbaum was up there interviewing him on the stage, and he said, kids, when I was a kid, he goes, I remember one time I jammed my thumb in practice in high school, and I said something to the coach, and exactly what you said, guys. He goes, son, I was in Okinawa 5 years ago. You'll get over it. Thank God we've got these hard-ass dads that we grew up with. I mean, I can just, I remember doing a story one time at Fort Benning Ranger Battalion, and it was during Ranger School, and some guy got a branch, poked him in the face, and cut him all up like that, and he was saying something, and the RI, the Ranger instructor, went over there to him, and I'm not going to repeat verbatim what he said because I can't, but he goes, get over it. I mean, and I remember the movie 300, the guy lost an eye, and he goes, the gods were kind enough to give me a spare.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta go in a minute, but one thought on the toughness.
How do they follow you too? Don't forget to do that.
Yeah. Well, Coach Hennessy and Coach Griskin, when they were still alive, I got to know them both very well. Coach Rutledge, all those guys.
Yeah.
And they could tell some Bryant stories. I'll have to tell you guys some one time. But one quick one, Coach Hennessy, Coach Bryant called him little buddy when Coach Hennessy played for me in Kentucky. And he was down on the ground one day, kind of holding his hand, and Coach Bryant walked up and said, "What's wrong with you, little buddy?" He said, "Coach, I think I broke my hand." He said, "Well, you don't run on your damn hands."
There you go. That's manhood 101.
That's the way it was. Hey, enjoy it, guys.
Hey, well, how do they follow you?
Oh yeah, you on X, Twitter, whatever it is, Twix as I call it, @ Gary Harris WVUA or Gary Harris _ WVUA, Gary Harris WVUA 23 Facebook page, WVUA23.com, Todd109.com, and with you guys every week. Thank you.
Please tag us on everything. We'll do the same for you. Thank you so much. All right. Hey, Matt Dean, and I let me tell you what. But when people say that you can't be tough on kids today, though, you got to be. They now more than ever. You've got to be cracking the whip and getting after them, man. I mean, and look, there's a lot of things you can do, but the worst thing you can do is be soft on people. It's wrong. Hey, let me say something about our sponsors, like Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. Check them out on the website, hewlettandunn.com. Over 7,000 pairs of boots. They've got STS. They've got the Filson. Heck, they're the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. They've got Barber. They've got Wrangler, Ariat. They've got Stetson. More duck heads than I've ever seen in my life. They've always got a 50% off rack. It is one of the coolest stores you'll ever go into. HewlettandDunn.com. They will ship anywhere. And the Acres Down South shirts, they've got the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, all the schools. And they're these moisture-wicking shirts that you can wear, like the nightcap that I gave to Brendan. And also, Rumble Boxing Gym in Midtown Memphis. Want to get a great workout? Matt, this is what I would do. I'd take my team over to Rumble Boxing, 1835 Union in Memphis. They're open every day. Check them out on the website, rumbleboxinggym.com, and do these 15 3-minute sessions, 45 minutes. That's the distance of a prize fight, a heavyweight fight. Awesome. All of our sponsors at sidelines.live. Again, ECS House Industries. You can find them all there. Tom Martin's Body Shop. You can find them. Miss Rubin's Rubs. Bottom line, we're here with the support of our great sponsors and our viewers. So I want to say thank you to all of them. Matt, I know John was going to try to join us. He's getting busier and busier in his role as an AD at ULM, donor meetings, compliance, all that kind of stuff. You know the life of an AD. There are no hours, and there really aren't any days off. Even if you're at the beach, you get a call that something's happened, you got to handle it. That's the way I am with my practice. That's the way we are with this show. You know what? When things start falling apart, you know what you got to do? Find excuses to win. Matt, you talk about those big guys in Iowa. Wrestling. Multi-sport. Way too many people are just playing that one sport and they're playing it year-round, and their bodies. You talk to surgeons now, like Dr. James Andrews and other orthopedic surgeons that I know and have talked to. Go back 20, 30 years ago, they may have had a dozen Tommy John's shoulders come in a year. Now it's over 200 if they have a big practice. Why are people not listening? I'm thinking they're going, I don't care. If I can make that much money, I'll walk around hurting for the rest of my life. I think that's where we are.
Well, let's start with the baseball first, Rob. I mean, I do think growing up playing baseball, playing a year of college baseball myself, I think, back in the old days, from a pitching standpoint, kids weren't afraid to, wasn't all slider and curveball. It was fastball changeup a lot when we grew up, right? Because we knew if not done properly, or even when done properly, the stress on a 12-6 curveball, if not done properly, can put a lot of stress on the arm. Slider's a wicked pitch too to throw, the stress you have on that. So I do think, as someone that's witnessed it, I've coached under 16 baseball before. I do think most pitching coaches are very concerned with young arms about doing the right thing. That's why we're we're talking about pitch counts. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about certain pitches we won't allow a kid to utilize until they get older and stronger. That being said, another thing that's not discussed, even in the statistics you provided, is kids are getting a Tommy John surgery and coming back stronger these days. It's almost like, in a weird way, when we had the ACL back in the 80s, we didn't know how to deal with it. And now ACL recovery is not uncommon for a successful college and pro athlete. Would you agree with that? I mean, there's no difference. As we've gotten faster, stronger, quicker, whatever you want to call it, the technology in the medical side has allowed us to recover, from these injuries. And I'll tell you another one, the Achilles injuries. Those are so random sometimes, and as we get older, Rob, you and I, we try to, prepare our bodies for everything. The other day, a busy day, and I was walking around and I could feel like my left Achilles just kind of like, sore. And I'm like, man, I just need to sit down for a second here,
or stretch.
When you get older and have to do Achilles rehab or an ACL rehab, man, it's not fun. But getting back to the young athletes, the athletes are better than ever. What I worry about is I just think we have to be smarter from a coaching perspective. And I'm not talking about college football or professional football in how much we ask out of these kids at an early age. And what's really difficult is sometimes young people are put in a situation where they're trying to make it for their families and they're put in some really tough spots. We got to take care of the athletes. We got to make sure we preserve these kids. And that's why, going back to the portal, and let's say I'm a kid that leaves a place, the better coaches, Rob, if you're on my team and you say, hey, coach, a lot of times these conversations are not strictly money driven. Kids are like, it's not going well for me. I lost my girlfriend. I don't feel like a fit here. And coaches are going to support that. And as a head coach, here's my number one rule as a head coach. If you weren't happy in my program, I would help you find a better situation. Because I recruited you and I told your mom and dad that I was going to take care of Rob Brown. He came play for me. Okay. Yeah. And if you came to me about that, there's a good chance you've already had that conversation with your family. So I'm going to help you in any way I can. I know it's hard sometimes. I look at the Caden Proctor situation in Iowa. He committed to Iowa as a rising senior in high school, goes to Bama, gets in the portal. It's at an Iowa basketball game. We think he's coming back to Iowa. Now he's back at Bama. I mean, those things happen. And I don't like the fact that we bash these kids sometimes on X and other social media. It's their decision. It's their decision. And
well, what is it? Henry David Thoreau said, what if to die, but to never have lived? Mm-hmm. And that's, everybody talks about nowadays, they want to be something special. And but you got to work for it. And I think about this over and over. Why do you work out all the time, Rob? Swimming, biking, running, all this stuff. I go, for life. That's right. Because if you look at your parents and as they get older and you ever go into a retirement home or assisted living, you're like going, man, I don't want to end up like that. I mean, I don't want to get where I can't walk. I can't do anything. And you'll do everything in your power. Eating right. Look at Chuck Norris. Guy's in his early 80s. Would you want to mess with him?
He's a badass.
Yeah, he's a badass. He takes care of himself. Anything worth having in this world is worth fighting for. And that's what we got to get. I think people say, Rob, just admit it. College athletics are never going to be the same. It's over. You keep talking about this free market. Admit, it's over. I'm like, no way. No way. This is just a pullback, just a bump in the road. Because if you put things in perspective, historical perspective, you will realize that in 1906, Matt, we damn near lost college football. The game that started November 6th, 1869 in Princeton, New Jersey, Rutgers 6, Princeton 4. There were 25 players on each side of the field. It was like a rugby scrum. And in 1906, we had 19 players die in that season.
Yeah.
And remember, the Georgia player, Tony Barnhart, chronicles this in that awesome film, Sewanee 1899 Unrivaled, that Norman Jetmanson, our friend in Birmingham, produced a couple of years ago. Go to Sewanee Unrivaled, Sewanee1899unrivaled.org and get a copy of it. It'll restore your faith, and you'll understand what I'm saying right now about college football. Tony Barnhart played a big role in that film's success, Mr. College Football in Atlanta. And he told the story of the mother of the Georgia player who had died on the football field as a result of his injuries. She appealed, a passionate appeal on the floor of the Georgia State House, the state legislature, and the governor, that my son would not have wanted college football to end because of his death. He would want us to keep going and fighting and making it better and safer, but not to quit. And shortly after that, Teddy Roosevelt, much to our chagrin, founded the NCAA, which has outlived its existence, its usefulness. It's like every federal program, Nothing, as Reagan said, is more like eternity on earth than a government program. How do you get rid of them? They're like your skin or the way you look. But anyway, we've been through some rough times in the 1950s. My dad will tell you, well, no one's going to go to the games anymore. They're on TV. And in the late 60s, we're going to integrate the sport. People won't go to the games. It's the best thing for race relations in America has been sports. Pulls everybody together. Nobody gives a damn, black or white, who's on that team, as long as they're wearing your jersey and they got a common goal. That pulls people together. It's just like in the military. And then in 1984, Chuck Ninus, the CFA, Oklahoma and Georgia, sue the NCAA. Because remember, before that, you could only be on TV 5 times in a 2-year period. More football games on than ever before. Name me a Division I stadium in America that has not expanded their stadium's size 2, 3, 4, 5 times since then. The more people see of it, the more they want to be there. You talk about man caves. Look, I think we saw during the pandemic, isolation, stay safe, stay home. Go broke safely is what that crap meant. People want to be around other people, Matt. I'd love to go to Niall Kinnick Stadium, who was a World War II veteran. He was killed in World War II. Believe he was an aviator, a pilot. And watch those 72,000 plus fans. They get into it, man. It's a little different when you got to play them up there versus a bowl game in Orlando in January, when most of the people from Iowa that have come down just want to warm up. It's just, that's their Super Bowl. But we're gonna be better. But I do think this, Matt. We need coaches like you that are dedicated to it. How do we keep coaches from saying, if I can't be tough on them, I'm out of here. I'm going to go work at the pet store. I'm on a roll, but I'm just upset about it.
No, I like your monologue there, Rob. Honestly, it's a great historical perspective of every time there's adversity, we find a way to push through. And listen, it's no different. When I was coaching, one of our themes that I learned from my mentor, Coach Herb Hilgeman, was we just got to find a way to get better every day. And sometimes when you play a game, you don't win a game, right? And you have to have perspective. And one of the things that we always talk about in the locker room prior to playing with my teams was, we want to play hard, we want to play smart, we want to play together for 40 minutes. Okay. Earlier, we had a discussion, and I think I'm going to tie this in. As an evaluator, we were talking about maybe there were some kids that went unnoticed in a small town and a small program. And all the talk we have about, do I want a kid from an elite level program? Well, I will tell you a couple of themes that I truly believe this, Rob. Every losing team has a leading scorer. Okay? I'm talking basketball here. Every team that's a losing team has a leading scorer. So it's not that I have not recruited kids before that have played on sub 500 teams and were the best player on that team. I have. But I will tell you this. Give me that 7th or 8th person from a state championship level team that goes against the best competition every day. If I can't get 1 through 5, I'll still take 6 or 7, because the reality of the situation is competition breeds competition. And maybe I didn't get the minutes. Maybe you were slightly better than me in high school.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean as a 20-year-old you're going to be better than me. And I believe that. And when we make these evaluations on student athletes and we look to build our teams, give me winners. Give me young men or women that have been coached from the people you're talking about and been pushed and been challenged. And when you do that and you get a collection of them, it's really the most rewarding thing for me is seeing the student athletes smile in happiness after a big win, a conference championship, an NCAA tournament win.
Yeah.
It's not about me patting myself on the back. It's about their reactions, putting it all together. There's not a more rewarding thing when you go from day one to that situation where you're hosting a conference tournament final and you're cutting down the nets.
Yeah.
And that collection of student athletes in that locker room, it's pretty special because you're going to have all conference players. You're going to have role identification players that don't play that much. You're going to have future doctors, future lawyers. I'm talking about my dynamic.
Yeah.
And the best part of it is, we've had teams that I've coached that now are coming on 10-year anniversaries from great seasons.
Yeah.
And just seeing where those student athletes are.
Yeah.
Izzy Tarani, one of my role players on 2 of my championship teams. She married Harrison Buckner, her high school sweetheart, who's the place kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. And she's been a part of multiple Super Bowls with him. Some of my players that are now doctors, some of my players that are now mothers, some of my players are now lawyers. That's what we miss about this whole student athlete. We get caught up in the wins and losses and who's going to win the Heisman and who's going to be left out of the Final Four, and that's the Final 12, right? But I think people don't understand. They get to see a version of it on Saturday or on weekends.
Yeah.
What we go through to get out of that field is pretty doggone difficult, but it's also very special.
Yeah. And, last night I listened to some really, really good stuff. I like to constantly, and iron sharpens iron. It says so in the good book. Okay. But there was a great, maybe it was a TED talk. And the topic was, when I feel like it, I'm going to start working out and taking care of myself. No, you can't it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Work out and take care of yourself so you'll feel like it. That's what you got to do. And everybody thinks that the soft approach is the way you got to do it now. I just don't buy it with, now with 4 kids, Hallie Wilson, Max and Mallory. You know what? You got to be tough on them. I've never seen a championship celebration on the field or on the court or in the pool, whatever it is, when they said, we didn't work hard, we screwed around a lot, nobody held each other accountable, coaches were soft on us, and nobody cared whether we won or lost. You're never going to hear that. And I know it's real popular among a bunch of these candy asses in today's world, but that's a lie. It does not work that way. And it's as basic, Matt, as when you and I were growing up, and we still hear it today. Anything in life worth having is worth fighting and worth working for. Walk the stairs to the top of the building. Don't take the elevator. It's not that easy. You can't punch a button and get to the top. You got to work. And the harder you work, the more you remember. Every time you get in a jam, that's what happens. So look, great stuff as always. Matt Dean, Rhodes College, swimming with the seals, not the polar bears. And by the way, if a polar bear can live on North Parkway in Memphis, a polar bear can live anywhere in the world, especially in the summer. I'll just say that, Matt. But look, great stuff as always. Brendan Martin, our executive producer, live from an undisclosed truck stop, whereabouts unknown, Daniel Simpson Day. Great job as always. And most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Folks, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. You know what? Start doing what you want to do every day, and you'll be what you want to be. You will be whatever you resolve yourself to be. So look, smash that subscribe button, forward this, tag us on everything you do, and we'll see you tomorrow. Matt, how can they follow you? And we'll say goodbye.
Rob, thanks for having me. At Dino Hoops 44 on X. You can always follow the links at www.roadslinks.com. Go Links. Have a great weekend, Ryan.
Absolutely. Everybody, too. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Brendan. Great job.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.